Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Ishaq Matan. I'm the Bay Area Director at Islamic Networks Group, also known as ING. Today, we'll be discussing Ramadan, school, and COVID-19 Part 2, and you may have seen Part 1, which was earlier this week on Tuesday. ING is a peacemaking organization dedicated to face-to-face education and engagement to foster understanding of Muslims and other misunderstood groups to promote harmony among all people. This series is an extension of our Islamic Speakers Bureau program. For this webinar, we have an exciting array of guests who include both ING staff and Bay Area directors. I'll now introduce our panelists, who include Ms. Helena Mueller-Flieg, a high school teacher in history and religious studies for 13 years. She earned her Master's of Theological Studies and a California teaching credential in social science. She currently teaches at St. Ignatius Prep in San Francisco, California. The next panelist will be Amina Jandali, a founding member and content manager of the organization bringing you this webinar series today, ING, and she holds a master's in Near Eastern Education from UC Berkeley. And finally, we'll have Ms. Berta Guillen, who is a high school teacher in the fields of humanities and social studies for 12 years. She earned her Master's of Education from the University of Colorado, Northern Colorado in 2017. And she currently teaches at Met West High School, which is in Oakland, California. And so I would like to thank you all for being here today, and we really appreciate your time, and we appreciate all of our viewers' time. And I also just want to reference that if you have any questions as a viewer, we will have time for questions at the end, and you can please feel free to write it in the chat. So we're going to get started. Helena, we'll start with you. This period of education has really been marked by students moving to online schooling through Zoom and other platforms. Can you get us started by commenting a little bit on the challenges of education during the pandemic, as well as these effects on students?
Sure, Ishaq, thank you. So a lot of us who are teachers have been conducting online classes on Zoom. And so many of us have experienced firsthand both the graces of Zoom, that we get to see our students face to face, but also the challenges of Zoom. The BBC did an article on this recently, and they reference things that many of us can relate to. Things such as the fact that natural conversations don't happen over Zoom. So nonverbal cues that we experience when we are face-to-face, we read people's facial expressions, we read people's body language. When we try to pay attention to this over Zoom, it just takes up more of our energy and we have to focus more. And so a lot of people find that having continuous Zoom calls throughout the day can be really draining. When we're also in face-to-face conversation, there are kind of natural breaks in conversation, and we read people's cues to figure out when to speak so that we can avoid interrupting each other. And when we experience kind of awkward silences or delays on Zoom, it can make students feel anxious or uncomfortable. It can make people feel self-conscious about something that they may have shared in a class discussion. And even the fact that so many of us have different sides to ourselves, and we think about our students, they might have a side to themselves that they bring to the classroom. They might have a different side that they bring to the sports field or to the stage if they do theater. And then they might have parts of themselves that they share at home. And moving to different physical locations reminds them of those different parts of themselves. But when we do things over Zoom, we might just be sitting in the same kitchen table in the same space in our house, and yet we're bringing all these different roles over the computer, and that can be stressful for students as well. Teen Vogue also did an article about just the emotional tolls of distance learning more broadly, not just specifically about Zoom, and they talked about how the teacher to student interaction, that in-person interaction is so important. And I know I've experienced this firsthand. If you have a student who you're worried about, being able to just say to them, listen, I need to check in with you after class. Why don't you hang back and we'll talk for 5 minutes is so effective. But sending them an email and having them just not respond, those students who are more vulnerable could fall through the cracks. There's also just a lack of structure and routine when you're doing work from home, and students can feel like there's just no break from school because they're doing school late at night, they're doing school on the weekends, and so forth. And then it also brings up lots of issues around privilege. We might have some students who have a dedicated internet device. Maybe they have their own iPad, they have their own laptop, they have a quiet space to work at home. And for them, it might not be as hard, but for other students that we have, they might not have a dedicated internet device. Maybe they have to share it with their siblings, or they have to share it with their parents. Maybe they don't have a quiet space. They're trying to work at the same table that their siblings are working on. I've had students who've told me they have to go into the bathroom to use Zoom because it's the only quiet space in their home. Some of our students have family obligations at home. They're being asked to watch their younger siblings while their parents work. So it brings up lots of issues around people's home situations and different privileges or disadvantages that they might experience. And then lastly, just the other mental health issues. Our students might be worried about friends and family, worried about their health and well-being. We know that depression can come from isolation. And the National Crisis Center actually reported that people calling in to report worrying that someone's life is in danger has more than doubled since the shelter in place. So there's been more reports of abuse, suicidal ideation, depression, cyberbullying, cutting, and other self-harm on the rise. So we just have to take all these things into consideration.
Thank you so much, Helena, for going through that. I mean, I think something that's really important is that we think that school moving online is easier, when in reality, like many of the challenges, it's so much harder, and something that even for teachers, I know that something that takes, in person, like 5 minutes to prep might take 40 minutes to prep because you have to navigate the challenges there. So thank you.
Thank you.
And another thing is that this is all kind of happening right now during a time of Ramadan. And I would like to ask Amina to tell us a little bit more about Ramadan and the significance of it to Muslims. And then after Amina, I will talk a little bit about how that impacts Muslim students.
So thank you very much, Ishaq. And I'm going to just go through a very brief introduction about Ramadan, and then Ishaq will talk more about its impact on Muslim students. So Ramadan is actually the name of the 9th month in the Islamic calendar, and it's an extremely holy time for Muslims, probably the most holy time of the year, partly because it is the month in which the Quran was first revealed. And so the Quran is very central to the practice of Ramadan. It's something that Muslims will try to complete during the month of Ramadan. It's also a month of fasting and extra worship, whether it's extra prayers, extra remembrance of God, all of this takes a heightened focus in Ramadan. It is also generally a highly communal time of year for Muslims, when they will be going to the mosque for extra prayers, when they'll be inviting friends and family over for fast breaking, when they will be having social events and fundraising dinners. And so that is, as we know this year, something that has changed drastically. The way that Muslims greet each other in Ramadan is by saying Ramadan Mubarak, which just means a blessed Ramadan. So when we think about fasting, and fasting is actually one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It's the 4th pillar, and you can see it in Arabic in 2 variations, Som or Siyam. There are many reasons and goals of fasting. So one of them is to draw closer to God, because when one is fasting purely for God, unlike a diet, no one's watching except God. So you could actually be cheating and no one would know except God. So that has a very special, significance. It's also a test in our willpower, because as anyone who has dieted knows, it's very hard to sometimes resist whatever one's bad habit is, whether it's coffee, whether it's candy bars. And yet again, they are avoiding all of that purely for God. It is supposed to be a time to really reflect on and improve one's character. So it's encouraged to avoid any negative actions, such as backbiting, arguing with people. If someone starts an argument, you're supposed to just walk away and say, I'm fasting. And so the whole focus is really coming out of this month like an intensive training as a better person. People are supposed to be extra charitable, helping those in need, sharing their food. And then again, it's generally supposed to be a time of strengthening community relations, as I talked about. So exactly how long is the Ramadan fast? Well, every year it moves 11 days earlier, because it is a purely lunar calendar, and so it's not adjusted. And so this year it began on April 24th and will end around May 23rd. So it's either a 29 or 30-day month. And the fast is every day from before dawn until sunset. So basically when the sun is in the sky. And the fast is a complete fast. It includes both food and drink as long as the sun is in the sky. So depending on what time of year we're talking about, it could be a 12-hour fast, which is generally the case in the winter, to as long as a 16-hour fast in the summer. This year it's slightly shorter. It's about a 15-hour fast because the fast begins a little before 5 a.m. and ends around 8 p.m. So what does a typical day in Ramadan look like? So Muslims will generally rise before dawn, before the first prayer, and eat a small meal. Some people eat breakfast-like food, other people eat, whatever. And then people either go back to sleep or they might stay awake because they have more energy and just continue their day, whether it's work or school. And then they will break fast at sunset. It is a prophetic tradition to break fast with dates, so that's usually a staple, but then every culture has their own types of appetizers or soups or fruits. And then they'll generally pray the evening prayer and then come back and have the complete dinner with their family. There's also, as I mentioned, this extra effort to perform daily prayers, the 5 daily prayers, as well as special night prayers that are called tarawih that come after the last night prayer. And then it's also encouraged to wake up a little before the morning prayer and do extra prayers at night. So a lot of prayers in addition to just the regular prayers. So how does this all change in a time of a pandemic? So as we've been talking about, Ramadan is normally a very communal time. And so part of the move has been from the mosque to the home. Mosques are closed. People can no longer go to the mosque, either for the 5 daily prayers or for the nightly prayers, where you would generally see people who don't pray 5 prayers in the mosque throughout the year will suddenly be going there every night. And so now that's all happening in the home. Online, you're having a lot of programs with scholars talking, after the breaking of the fast or on Fridays. And so that's kind of taken a central role for the Muslim community. And then of course, breaking fast and all the prayers are now taking place at home. So what was previously, throughout my whole life, throughout most people's whole life, a very social time where people look forward to seeing people they hadn't seen all year. They look forward to catching up with their friends and family, has now become only family time. So the same people you're spending the entire day with are the only people now you're seeing at this dinner table. And so it has both positive and negative impacts on both families and students. Some of the positives are that it's a less stressful Ramadan. People don't have to drive long distances. They don't have to worry about, if I go to this social event, is it going to take away from my nightly prayers? And then the negative, as we've talked about, is just missing that social interaction, and as well as the spiritual benefit of going to the mosque. So I'm going to stop and then turn it over to Ishaq, who's going to talk about the impact on Muslim students.
Thank you, Amina. I'm going to share my screen and full screen. So give us 1 second. Hold on. Give me 1 second. There we go. Okay, so thank you so much, Amina, for presenting a little overview of Ramadan, and especially how we've seen some of the changes of Ramadan in light of COVID-19. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that impact is on Muslim students. So Amina did touch on this idea of events. And one thing that's been positive is there is a little bit less stress on events that might interfere with school, especially at the end of the school year. Students don't have to necessarily go to other families' houses or special events at the mosque as much as they might otherwise. Unfortunately, all of the changes and the challenges that Helena mentioned in the beginning of the webinar have just been kind of compounded on for a lot of Muslim students who might be feeling a lot of those same emotional issues. So as an example, students who might feel a sense of social isolation from school friends now, whereas before they might be able to interact with Muslim friends at the mosque, will not be able to. So it does definitely pan a pretty large effect on these students. In terms of students fasting, first, it's important to recognize that Students don't begin fasting, are not generally required to fast until they've reached an age of maturity. But students who are, as young as 7 may want to emulate their parents or their siblings, and they may fast or fast one day and not a second day or something like that. So even educators in elementary school may actually encounter students who come to school and are looking to fast. By middle school, though, most observant Muslim students will be fasting the entire month. And these students may also be performing special night prayers that Amina mentioned, the Tarawih. And what we'll see is that these fasting and these late nights may then impact students' energy levels at a potential which may also impact their schoolwork. This has especially played a role during COVID-19, where we've seen a lot of school move onto the virtual space where lectures and assignments are posted at a certain time of day, and then students have to complete them at another time of day. So first off, that kind of schedule may be a little bit more challenging for students during Ramadan in terms of being able to complete the assignments, whether they are sleeping in later or just not available throughout the day. As an example, at 8 o'clock is when a lot of people will break their fast. And so between 8 and 8:30, 9, that's when students are eating dinner. And then if they're attending a night prayer, then that will begin around 9:30 to maybe 10:30. And so there's a lot of structure throughout the day. If they're trying to gain a sense of spirituality during this month, that may come in the way of them being able to complete the assignments. And so as an example, if an assignment is posted in the afternoon and then it's due at midnight, there really isn't a huge window of time for a student to be able to complete that assignment. And so we would ask teachers to consider posting assignments earlier. That way they can, if assignments are posted as early as 7 a.m., then a student can wake up for their morning meal around 5, and then they can kind of get right to work at that time. And then there's also a possibility of extending deadlines so that they have a little bit more time in the later night to complete what they need for your work. Another thing is that not everyone is kind of in a recorded offline school mode, and so there are places who are conducting live classes. And in those situations, live classes, especially in the morning, may be challenging for students in terms of their participation. And so there is a potential to tape the lecture and record it and then allow students to watch it later and give them that exemption, so long as they watch it and complete the assignments. Or there's a possibility to allow students to attend class, but maybe replace their class participation grades with alternative assignments. So one student had told me that he's able to type up his reactions to comments made in class after the period, which, during the lesson, he might be a little bit more lethargic, but afterwards he has had a chance to reflect and be able to respond. Another thing is that there are students who are maybe more expressive about their Muslim identity, and they may want to share a little bit about their Ramadan experience with the class. And we do have several resources to enable them to do that if they're interested, including a presentation on Ramadan, which is oriented towards Muslim teenagers delivering it. We also have answers to frequently asked questions, and having the student be able to kind of present on a video conference is something that they might enjoy. The end of Ramadan is a holiday that's known as Eid. Eid al-Fitr is the Arabic phrase, which literally translates to festival of breaking the fast. It is like what anyone would associate with any holiday. It's a celebration. It includes morning prayers, gifts, money, new clothes, food, and things like that. This year, they probably will not be much celebration, but in order for students to have a sense of pride in the holiday, there's a chance that teachers can mention it in class. So this year, it'll probably also fall on a weekend, May 23rd and May 24th, but having, wishing Eid Mubarak, which is the greeting to students after on the 25th on Monday might be something that would be great. And also even asking students who might be comfortable to share a little bit about the holiday and how they adapted the holiday to this current environment that we're seeing. And so I just want to clarify that in summary, Muslim students are very diverse in terms of their experiences, and their online experiences will vary. And so the really best thing that educators can do when accommodating their students during Ramadan, during COVID-19, is to keep an open mind when working with them and to really just reach out to them and speak with them to get a sense of where they are during the month and what they might need specifically. That helps them to feel more recognized and validated in their own environments. And it also helps to provide a sense of confidence as they balance their Muslim American and student identities together in this time. And so that is an overview of this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm now going to ask Berta, you are a teacher, you have Muslim students, and I would love to learn a little bit more about ways that you've been able to interact with those students during this time and accommodate what they're looking for and promote inclusive classrooms.
Thank you, everybody, for, thank you, Isaac. Thank you, everybody, for the framing. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak on this topic. So some of the approaches that I've been taking is to really understand my students' family situation. And so those that are observant, to really understand how that might impact their experience. So some of my students that are from Yemen, first, even before the pandemic occurred, were impacted by the immigration restrictions, right? So their experience already is very heightened, and maybe in their experience, they're also maybe more aware of the things happening in the world and how they're vulnerable in some ways. So I try my best to check in because of that already in multiple ways, whether it's through WhatsApp, via text. My students have found multiple avenues to express what's going on for them since before the pandemic. And I think that that was really an important part of being able to respond now. And that each student is impacted in their homes in different and unique ways. And especially as a senior teacher, they're impacted by being the eldest in their families. So one student is now taking on the responsibility that I might do is now the teacher. She's also babysitting and also helping her mother cook, right? And that was not new to this pandemic. However, school was a respite from those roles. At every student, observant or not, could be at school the academic, the runner. She was the artist, one was the reader, the entrepreneur, and now at home, like Helena said, it's one identity, and I think that that can be overwhelming. And so my role right now has really my role has been to observe their grievance of that loss of independence. And it's crucial to my overall understanding of their capacity to do online work. They just can't do it at the times that I'm on my Zoom lesson, and I have to be flexible and understanding of that. And all of aspects of their community have moved online. As Amina said, mosque, on family gatherings, Arabic school, it's a huge shift all at once, and their sense of loss is great. And my job is to walk with them and not make things too hard. And for another student, the pandemic has resulted in working 3 jobs. And so some students maybe typically had a break at school and then could go home and be with family and pray, but now they're working 3 jobs, meaning like Instacarting, food deliveries, and working at a transportation agency in SF. So again, those roles existed before this happened. And my role as an educator has been to understand how their lives have shifted dramatically as the result of this. And so some of the considerations I've been using as considerations for how I post assignments on Google Classroom when I post them, but also recognizing that they just may not be able to do them, and that their inability to complete is not for a lack of effort and desire to learn. And so I needed to revise or recreate things for them to demonstrate their engagement, and to award them some kind of recognition for that. So that might be like thanking them for attending one Zoom call, completing one Flipgrid assignment, turning something in via WhatsApp that you can record an audio and send to the teacher. It might not be all the work that I assigned for the week, but it really does show their engagement. I also started to assign them different meaningful tasks related to the content. So I teach economics. And so I offer like one personal finance project, like completing a resume, researching different credit card options, exploring how to finance their college in the fall, or create a budget. And then it made our one-on-one check-ins a little more meaningful and relevant for them. I just want to reiterate that in communication in any form had to be possible. And it may not be the face-to-face that I want on Zoom, but making space and time and acknowledging their efforts was really an important part of that. I think all of that's really a result of a school culture that has been embracing the different Muslim students at our school, their strengths. It really acknowledges them, acknowledges the demands on them as individuals. And we have a focus at our school on relationships and real world learning. So all of that can continue offline. You know, all of that can continue despite not seeing each other. And I think that that is something that we've been able to build off of. And I'm really proud of our ability to respond in this moment to the needs of our Muslim students.
Great, thank you, Berta, so much. And thank you for taking time to actually think through how you can structure some of your lessons to accommodate the students and their challenges, whether they be Muslim related or otherwise. At this point, we did want to see if anyone had any questions. And so I'm looking at the chat and I don't see any questions. And so if you do have questions, please feel free to write them now. But if not, we will go ahead and close for today. I want to thank all of you as panelists for taking time. I know it's incredibly busy to be a teacher right now, and so really appreciate that. And I want to thank Amina as well for talking a little bit more about Ramadan, and want to thank our viewers for tuning in to this webinar this evening. If you want to get a sense of perspective from students, there's also a webinar on our Facebook page about that as well. I will just display my screen one more time to highlight a few resources. So some resources for educators include a presentation on Ramadan, which talks a little bit more about what Amina mentioned earlier. We also have a Ramadan information sheet, which is just like a quick page that one can print that has all the information in a really handy guide. We have adult answers to FAQs on Muslims and Islam, which teachers may want. And then I think this might be the most, one of the most relevant resource for teachers is the 5-year calendar of important Islamic dates. And so that is from 2020 to 2025, really just dates throughout the year that you can look at in the beginning of your school year to plan to maybe acknowledge or at least like be aware of if a student might need to be absent on a certain day for certain holidays and things like that. We also have writing and a handout on religious practices of Muslim students in public schools, so you can get a sense of where of how to accommodate Muslim students in regards to their rights, whether they be praying in school or being excused in the library during fasting and things like that. And in general, we're always welcome to present any sort of presentation on Muslims or Islam, or an interfaith panel or an intercultural panel on various topics in your school or business. And you can feel free to write to mail@ing or just check our website and the listings there. If you do have any questions, then you're welcome to put them in the chat here and we will look at them and respond. But also you can send an email to mail@ing.org. So I am going to stop sharing. And yeah, so thank you again. And I would like to wish everyone watching a wonderful rest of your evening.